forest doesn't forgive. It watches you with 1,000 indifferent eyes, waiting for that one moment of weakness. My moment had come. The wind howled a familiar accusation, a voice I'd run 1,000 miles to escape. Is this it? I heard myself whisper, the words swallowed by the storm. Is this the end of the line? But something inside, a stubborn ember that refused to be extinguished, had a different answer. Welcome to THUY Survival Life. We invite you to listen to the story. Our story begins not with the storm, but with the quiet determination that preceded it. This is Arthur. He came to this sprawling, untamed wilderness seeking not adventure, but anonymity, a place where his past couldn't find him. With his life reduced to the contents of a single backpack, every step was a deliberate move away from a world that no longer had a place for him. The dense canopy of the forest became his sanctuary and his prison. Here, the only judgment came from the silent ancient trees. He was a man stripped down to his most essential self, a survivor by necessity, a recluse by choice. His face, etched with a quiet sorrow, told a story of its own, one of loss, and perhaps a faint glimmer of hope for redemption. He moved through the woods with a practiced economy of motion. This wasn't a casual hike. It was a reconnaissance mission into the heart of his new life. The nearby stream was his lifeline, a source of fresh water, and a constant murmuring reminder that life, in some form, always flows on. Each rustle of leaves, each snap of a twig, was a piece of information to be processed. Is it friend, foe, or food? He carried the burden of his decision in the weight of his pack. But here, at least, the burden was physical, tangible. He paused, not just to rest his body, but to quiet his mind. The silence of the woods was deafening at first, a void he was desperate to fill with purpose. Purpose, he knew, began with the basics. Shelter, fire, water, food, 4 pillars of existence. He selected his campsite with care, paying respect to the land he now called home. A small clearing, defensible, with access to resources. The knife was more than a tool, it was an extension of his will to survive. With it, he would carve out a space for himself in this world. An old fallen giant provided the first building blocks of his new home. Nothing in the forest goes to waste. Soon, the first wisps of smoke curled towards the sky. A signal not for rescue, but of defiance. A declaration that he was still here. As dusk began to settle, he finally allowed himself a moment of rest. The primal comfort of a crackling fire, warding off the encroaching darkness. This small circle of light was his entire world now. A fragile barrier against the vast, unknown wilderness. A warm cup of something foraged, perhaps a pine needle tea, offered a small comfort. It was a taste of the earth, a reminder of his connection to this place. In these quiet moments, the lines on his face seemed to soften. Was he finding a sliver of the peace he came here for? His camera, his only companion, served as a journal, a silent witness to his solitary journey. The first real meal, each spoonful was a victory, earned through sweat, knowledge, and sheer willpower. Every task was performed with a deliberate, almost meditative focus. There was no room for error when the margin for survival was so thin. He treated the environment with respect, understanding he was a guest. What he took, he used completely, leaving as little trace as possible. The rhythmic work of carving wood was a balm for his troubled soul. It was a simple, honest labor with a clear result, a stark contrast to the complexities of his former life. He carried not just water, but also potent, locally sourced remedies. Knowledge passed down through generations of those who lived in harmony with the land. His hands, though calloused, were precise. Years of experience were evident in every controlled movement. Navigation was key. Relying on a compass and his intimate understanding of the terrain, he mapped his small territory. Foraging was a daily necessity. Identifying edible plants and avoiding poisonous ones was a skill that meant the difference between a full belly and a painful death. Even the humblest of creatures, like this snail, could provide vital protein. In the wild, you can't afford to be a picky eater. Wild citrus, a burst of flavor, and a precious source of vitamin C. A small treasure unearthed from the forest floor. Every resource was cataloged and stored. Preparation was the foundation upon which survival was built. With his tools, he was not just surviving, he was creating, fashioning a life from the raw materials the wilderness provided. He seems to have the basic skills down pat. But what do you think is the single most important skill for long-term survival? Let us know in the comments. The forest was a strict teacher. It taught humility, patience, and the profound interconnectedness of all living things. His provisions were his wealth, worth more than any gold in this new economy of existence. He examines a piece of jadite, a stone of the forest. A beautiful, useless thing in the face of hunger, but a reminder of the world's hidden beauty. The knife is always ready, a constant reminder of the thin line between peace and peril. A flash of monochrome feathers caught his eye. A magpie, another solitary creature, watching him with intelligent curiosity. A silent observer, just like him. But survival wasn't just about passive observation. It demanded action. Hard, physical labor that left no energy for painful memories. He moved deeper into the woods, his confidence growing with each passing day. The forest was becoming less of an adversary and more of a partner. Documenting his journey was a way to maintain his own humanity, to remind himself that he was more than just a creature struggling to exist. His senses were becoming sharper. He could read the stories written in the bent twigs and disturbed soil. The solitude was a double-edged sword. It offered peace, but also allowed the ghosts of his past to whisper in the quiet moments. A sturdy branch could be a walking stick, a shelter support, or a weapon. Resourcefulness is the art of seeing potential in the ordinary. But some tasks required more than just ingenuity. They required power, and the saw was his mechanical muscle. The sound of the blade biting into wood echoed through the trees. A sound of progress, of a man imposing his will on the environment to secure his future. With his task complete, he continued his exploration, always pushing the boundaries of his known world. This was his kingdom now, a vast green empire where he was the sole inhabitant and ruler. He climbed not for the view, but for perspective, and sometimes for the resources hidden in the canopy. The focused, rhythmic chopping was a kind of meditation. Each swing was a blow against the despair that sometimes threatened to creep in at the edges of his mind. Moving through the dense undergrowth required strength and agility. The forest did not yield its paths easily. He was a part of the landscape now, his silhouette blending with the trees. He was learning the art of being unseen, unheard. He walked for miles each day, driven by a restless energy. To stop moving was to stop living. The sheer, overwhelming vitality of the forest was both intimidating and inspiring. Life, in its most raw and powerful form, was everywhere. A hunting tool, a heavy responsibility, in a world where every life, including his own, hung in the balance. It was for sustenance only. Rest was a luxury, earned only after the day's essential work was done. Here he could sit and watch the slow, steady rhythm of the woods. There was a profound sense of satisfaction in this simple life. Everything he had earned with his own two hands. Processing firewood was a constant, never-ending chore. But a well-stocked woodpile was a beautiful sight, a promise of warmth and cooked meals. He worked with a relentless pace, fueled by a deep-seated need to be prepared for anything. The wild is predictable in its unpredictability. He stood before an ancient tree, a silent giant that had witnessed centuries of change. He felt a sense of humility in its presence. This single tree could provide shelter, fire, and tools. It was a living monument to the generosity of nature. His movements were now more confident, more fluid. He was no longer a stranger here. He was becoming part of the ecosystem. He had mastered the art of seeing, not just looking, but truly understanding the language of the forest. With each step, he left his old life further and further behind. The man he used to be was a ghost that haunted a different world. The steady rhythm of his work was the new soundtrack of his life, a constant, reassuring beat in the immense silence. The camera lens was his confessor. Through it, he could express the things he had no words for. Every log, every branch, had a purpose. In his hands, the raw materials of the forest were transformed into the components of survival. As he worked, he was not just building a camp. He was rebuilding himself, piece by piece. He had an eye for the details, the subtle signs that revealed the best wood, the safest path, the closest water source. Even here, in the heart of the wilderness, a link to the outside world remained. A tool for emergencies, a temptation, a tether he wasn't quite ready to cut. As the sky darkened and the temperature dropped, he donned another layer. The rain was coming. The storm wasn't just a physical challenge. It was a psychological one, mirroring the turmoil he still felt inside. He hunkered down, conserving his energy, waiting for the worst of it to pass. He had learned that some battles are won by enduring, not by fighting. The rain washed the world clean, turning the forest into a symphony of dripping leaves and rushing water. It was a powerful, beautiful, and dangerous display. His preparations were now being put to the test. A dry shelter and a good supply of wood were his defense against the cold and damp. Even in the rain, the work continued. Survival doesn't take a day off. He moved with a grim determination. The storm was an obstacle, but it would not defeat him. He skillfully stripped branches, his movements efficient and precise. Every calorie expended had to be justified. The forest seemed to close in around him in the gray, misty light. The world had shrunk to the immediate task at hand. He gathered his materials, a silent promise of future warmth and security. He was always thinking 2 steps ahead. He hoisted the heavy log onto his shoulder, a testament to the strength he had discovered within himself, born of necessity. Each trip added to his growing fortress of firewood, a bulwark against the cold and the long nights. He balanced on a fallen log, his body now perfectly attuned to the uneven terrain. He moved with the grace of a creature born to this environment. The rain had eased, but the world was still damp and dripping. He pressed on, knowing the work was not yet done. The axe was a tool of raw power. In his hands, it could fell a tree or split a log with equal precision. His path was one he forged himself with every step and every swing of his axe. He was the master of his own small destiny. He surveyed his domain, a quiet satisfaction in his gaze. This was his home, built not of brick and mortar, but of resilience and sweat. The meticulous work of preparing the wood continued. He spent hours in this repetitive rhythm, an almost meditative state. In a situation that demands constant vigilance, what are your thoughts? Would you find comfort in such repetitive tasks, or would the silence and focus get to you? The rhythmic thud of the axe was a sound of life, of purpose. It was the sound of a man refusing to surrender. For a brief moment, he captured his own reflection. The face of a stranger, weathered by the sun and hardened by the wild. He noticed the small details, the way the light filtered through the leaves, the intricate patterns of the bark. He was learning to appreciate a different kind of beauty. He shared his world with other inhabitants. This small bird, perched on a branch, was a fellow survivor, a tiny heartbeat in the vast wilderness. The work never stopped. The demands of survival were relentless, a constant cycle of tasks that began anew each day. He used his body as a lever, his knowledge of physics as valuable as his strength. He worked smarter, not just harder. He took inventory of his supplies, his mind a constant ledger of what he had and what he needed. Meticulous planning was his greatest ally. He rested, but he was never truly off guard. His posture was relaxed, but ready. His senses always alert to the sounds of the forest. Water was life. He drank deeply, replenishing the energy he had expended, preparing for the tasks that still lay ahead. He rationed his water carefully. Even with a stream nearby, he took nothing for granted. In his eyes, you could see the constant calculation, the weighing of risks and rewards, the planning of the next hour, the next day, the next week. The beard was not a fashion statement. It was a practical shield against the elements, a sign of his separation from the civilized world. He moved through his camp with a sense of ownership. This small patch of earth was the one place in the world where he truly belonged. He was a hunter, a gatherer, a builder, an echo of ancient ancestors who had lived this same life for millennia. He was dwarfed by the scale of the forest, a humbling reminder of his own smallness in the grand scheme of things. Another tool, another task. The saw's sharp teeth made quick work of the wood, saving him precious time and energy. His journey was not just a physical one. It was a pilgrimage into the depths of his own soul. He walked with a purpose now, not just wandering but heading towards a specific goal. He was shaping his environment, not just reacting to it. His pack, once a burden, now felt like a part of him, a tortoise's shell containing everything he needed to survive. He used a branch to test the ground ahead, a simple but effective precaution. A single misstep could lead to disaster. The felling of a tree was a significant event. It was a sacrifice, but a necessary one for his continued survival. He worked with a focused intensity, his entire being concentrated on the task. In these moments, there was no room for anything else. The tree fell with a deafening crash, a moment of destruction that would lead to the creation of shelter and warmth. He stood over his prize, a sense of accomplishment washing over him. This was a victory, hard won and deeply satisfying. He knelt, examining the grain of the wood, already planning its future uses. His mind was always working, always strategizing. With his knife, he began the long process of shaping the wood to his needs. Patience was a virtue he had learned out of necessity. Exhausted, he allowed himself a moment of complete rest. The forest floor was his bed, the canopy his roof. He looked out at his world, the quiet observer. What thoughts were going through his mind in this moment of stillness? His knife was a multi-purpose tool, used for everything from preparing food to crafting essential items. He kept it sharp, always. There was a hardness in his eyes now, a reflection of the unforgiving world he inhabited. There was also a profound sense of calm. He had found a rhythm, a routine that gave structure to his days. Wake, work, eat, sleep. The simple, honest cycle of life. He was no longer just a man in the woods. He was the woodsman, a figure as timeless as the forest itself. The repetitive work continued, each action building upon the last, creating a foundation of security in an insecure world. He paid close attention to the details of his work. Quality craftsmanship could mean the difference between a shelter that stands and one that collapses. He looked different now. Leaner, tougher, more at ease in his own skin than he had ever been in his old life. The hunting tool was not for sport. It was a means of acquiring sustenance, a tool to be used with respect and a heavy heart. He gathered kindling, the small, essential pieces that would bring his fire to light. He knew that great things often have humble beginnings. He knelt before his work, a craftsman examining his creation. There was pride in his posture, the satisfaction of a job well done. He tended to the new growth, a sign of his hope for the future. He was not just taking from the forest, he was nurturing it. He was a protector of his small domain. vigilant against the dangers that lurked in the shadows. He patrolled the perimeter of his camp, a silent guardian watching over his solitary kingdom. The tool was a reminder of the harsh realities of this world, a world where the line between predator and prey was constantly shifting. He moved with a quiet confidence. The fear and uncertainty of his first days had been replaced by a deep, instinctual knowledge of this place. The forest provided everything he needed. He had learned to ask for it correctly, with respect and hard work. He had become a master of his environment. He could read the weather in the clouds, the time of day, in the slant of the sun. His journey had taken him far from the man he once was. He had been stripped of everything, and in that emptiness he had found himself. He carried his home on his back, a freedom and a burden all at once. He was always prepared, ready to defend himself, his camp, and his hard-won peace. He was a part of the forest now, as much as the trees and the animals. He had found his place in the great, intricate web of life. He stood tall, a man who had faced his demons and emerged stronger. The wilderness had not broken him, it had forged him anew. He knelt, not in prayer, but in a state of deep focus, preparing for the hunt, a solemn ritual as old as humanity itself. He worked on his shelter, reinforcing it against the elements, a constant process of improvement, of striving for a better, safer existence. The trees were his allies. They provided shelter, fuel, and a sense of enduring strength. The axe rose and fell, a steady rhythm against the backdrop of the forest's quiet hum. This was the sound of his life now. He scaled the fallen log with practiced ease. His body was strong, his movements sure. He walked the path he had cleared, a small mark of his presence in this vast, untamed world. The lake was a mirror, reflecting the sky, the trees, and the man who stood at its edge. A moment of perfect, profound stillness. He looked at his reflection, perhaps seeing for the first time the man he had become. Weathered, solitary, but whole. The lines around his eyes were not just from age, but from squinting into the sun, from searching the horizon. They were lines of experience. He had learned a language of silence, and in that silence, he had finally begun to hear his own voice. He stood as a silent sentinel, a guardian of his own solitude. He had found what he was looking for, not in a place, but within himself. He was a man at peace with his world, a world that he had built with his own hands, from the ground up. The forest had given him a second chance, a chance to live a simpler, more honest life. The rain returned, a familiar visitor, but this time he was ready for it. He found strange beauty in the forest's oddities, a brightly colored fungus, a testament to the wild, vibrant life that thrived in the shadows. He cleared his camp, a ritual of order and cleanliness even in the wild. It was a way of maintaining discipline, of keeping chaos at bay. He prepared his fire with the skill of an artist. He knew the exact combination of tinder, kindling, and fuel to bring a flame to life, even in the damp. The first spark caught a tiny sun in the gloomy afternoon. It was a moment of magic, of creation. He sat by the fire, its warmth seeping into his bones. It was more than just heat, it was companionship. He gathered moss, a natural insulator, and a soft bedding material. The forest provided solutions to problems he hadn't even known he would have. He cooked his meal over the open flame. The smell of wood smoke and roasting food was the scent of home. He found a comfortable spot, a natural chair formed by the roots of a tree. He had learned to see the comfort and shelter that the forest offered. He sat in contemplation, watching the flames dance. The fire was a living thing, a focal point for his thoughts. He looked up at the sky, a rare moment of vulnerability. Was he thinking of the life he left behind, or the future he was building? His posture was one of complete relaxation. He was no longer a visitor here, he was a resident. The fire was the heart of his camp, a source of light, warmth, and security. He was a solitary figure, but he was not lonely. He had the company of the trees, the stars, and the fire. He sharpened a stick, preparing a tool for cooking. Every action was deliberate, purposeful. He tended the fire with a gentle hand. He understood its power and its needs. His meal was simple, but it was earned, and that made it the most satisfying feast he had ever eaten. He was self-sufficient, a man who depended on no one but himself and the land. It was a terrifying and exhilarating way to live. The fire roared to life, a beacon of defiance against the encroaching night. He was the keeper of the flame. The fire cast long, dancing shadows. The forest was transformed into a place of mystery and beauty. In the flickering light, he seemed like a figure from another time, a link to a more primal, elemental past. He was at peace, the kind of deep, quiet peace that can only be found far from the noise of the world. He ate with a slow, deliberate enjoyment, savoring every bite, grateful for the sustenance the forest had provided. That simple meal by the fire feels like a massive victory. What's a small accomplishment that made you feel truly proud and self-reliant? Share your story with us. The fire was his television, his book, his companion. He could watch it for hours, lost in its hypnotic dance. He prepared his food with a care that bordered on reverence. He understood the sacredness of a meal when you don't know where the next one is coming from. A moment of indulgence. A hand-rolled smoke, a small comfort from his old life that he still allowed himself. He examined a tooth, a reminder of his own mortality. In the wild, a small injury or infection could be a death sentence. He maintained his personal hygiene as best he could. It was a matter of health, but also of morale, a way of holding onto his humanity. Even here, the simple, mundane rituals of daily life continued, a small act of normalcy in an extraordinary situation. As night fell, the forest became a different world, a world of shadows and unseen things. His fire was a lone star in a sea of blackness, a tiny island of light and warmth. He used a candle for close-up work, conserving the batteries of his flashlight. Every resource was managed with meticulous care. He was a silhouette against the flames, a solitary figure holding back the night. The darkness did not frighten him anymore. He had learned to see with his ears, to feel the world around him. His face, illuminated by the fire, was a mask of concentration. The night was a time for watchfulness, for reflection. Even his cat, Mr. Midnight, seemed to have adapted to this new life, a silent, furry companion, and a formidable hunter in his own right. He prepared his bed for the night, a simple but comfortable nest of moss and leaves. His flashlight cut a sharp beam through the darkness, a tool for navigating the transformed world of the night. He stood before the fire, a final check before turning in. The flames would keep the predators at bay, and the cold from his bones. The fire dwindled to glowing embers, a promise of the morning to come. He was constantly observing, constantly learning. The forest was his teacher, and he was its most dedicated student. He had everything he needed on his back. He was a self-contained unit, a man who had learned the true meaning of freedom. He slept the deep, dreamless sleep of the exhausted, a sleep earned through a day of hard, honest work. He practiced the art of concealment. In the wild, being unseen was often the best defense. He sat in stillness, becoming a part of the landscape. He could stay this way for hours, watching, listening, waiting. He was a man of contrasts, hard and rugged, yet gentle and respectful of the world around him. His gloves were a second skin, protecting his hands from the constant rough work. They were scarred and worn, a testament to his labor. He found comfort in the solid, unyielding presence of the rocks and trees. They were constants in a world of change. He was a master of patience. He knew that the forest operated on its own time, and he had learned to adapt to its slow, steady rhythm. He knelt, a position of humility and respect. He was a guest in this ancient land, and he never forgot it. Perhaps he was praying, not to a god in the sky, but to the spirit of the forest, the life force that pulsed all around him. The ritual of cooking was a comfort, a familiar process that brought a sense of order and normalcy to his day. He sat close to the fire, absorbing its life-giving energy. He was a moth, drawn to a flame, a man seeking light in the darkness. He was alone, but he had found a kind of family here. The fire, the trees, the stars. They were his silent companions. He was a man who had lost everything, only to find that he had everything he needed. A profound and paradoxical truth that the wilderness had taught him. He had built a life here, not just a camp, a life of purpose, of meaning, of deep connection to the natural world. He treated the trees with a gentle reverence. He understood that they were living beings, not just resources to be exploited. His camera was his storyteller. Through its lens, he could share the beauty and the brutality of his world without saying a word. He knelt before the fire, a humble supplicant, grateful for its warmth, its light, and the life it sustained. His cooking was simple but nutritious. He had learned to make the most of the limited ingredients the forest provided. The fire was a living thing, and he fed it with care. A symbiotic relationship, where each sustained the other. He had found a kind of contentment here that had eluded him in the civilized world. A quiet, simple joy in the act of living. The pot simmered over the flames. A promise of a hot meal, a reward for a day of hard labor. He was a man in his element, perfectly at home in a world that would terrify most people. He drank from his cup, a moment of quiet contemplation. The simple act of sipping a warm drink was a profound luxury. He had found shade under a friendly tree, a partnership with nature, based on mutual respect. His tent was his castle, a small fragile fortress against the vastness of the wild. He held a piece of his world in his hand, a simple, natural object, imbued with the spirit of the forest. He stood as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a man who had been broken but had refused to be defeated. He was a mystery, a man without a past, living a life that was both ancient and new, a story written on the canvas of the wilderness. His journey was far from over, but he had found his path, and he was walking it with courage and determination. With every step, he moved further away from the man he was, and closer to the man he was meant to be. In the end, the storm came, just as he knew it would. A physical manifestation of the turmoil he had fought so hard to overcome. He faced it without fear. He had learned that you cannot control the storm, you can only control how you respond to it. The moss on the rocks, ancient and resilient, was a reminder that life persists even in the harshest conditions. He was no longer a man running from his past. He was a man standing firm in his present. He had found his shelter, not just in a tent, but within himself, a place of inner strength that no storm could touch. He was the survivor, a man who had walked into the heart of the wilderness and found not death, but life. If you enjoyed this story, please like and share this video. And leave a comment with your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to the THUY Survival Life channel and hit the notification bell so you